We're smooth 98.1 FM. Good morning and welcome to Freshly Pressed. It's gone exactly 28 minutes now before it is 8 o'clock, and it is time to dig into the newspaper headlines this morning. Let's begin because I'll be joined in the studio to help dissect the papers by two gentlemen. I've got in the nation's capital, I've got Joseph Obari joining us this morning. Good morning to you, Joseph.
Good morning, Omatseye.
And I've
Good
got
to have us back here again. And
we're good to
my
go.
colleague, yeah, good to go.
Good morning, Lagos. Good morning, Omas. Good morning, Joseph. It's a
Morning.
great morning. It's a great start to the weekend.
All right, for the regulars and for those who are regular for Fridays, they would know that usually the tag team of AV and Joseph would be the pair. But we'd just like to inform you that AB Bozimo at this moment, like we said that sometime last week, is bereaved and is laying the mother, Professor Doris Oshewemi Bozimo, to rest this weekend. So that's why he's away from Freshly Pressed this morning. Our thoughts and prayers to the family.
Our thoughts are with him. Yeah.
All right, that said, we would like you to be part of the conversation this morning as we pick up the papers when you send in your messages. WhatsApp messages to 0809-444-0981 will be where we like to read all of the messages coming in terms of your reactions to the stories this morning. So Joseph, would like you to help us get started this morning. And let's begin with, from Davos is where we would like to pick up the story. Davos, because the nation's number 2 man is in Davos. That's Kashim Shettima. And the Guardian newspaper speaks here saying, Shettima urges African leaders to ramp up the continent's $3.1 trillion GDP. Speak to us about this and how Nigeria can also help push the continent in this direction.
Well, it's unfortunate that it appeared that African political elite simply wrested political power from colonialists for the fancy, the sweet part of simply being in power and enjoying the allure of power, and not really with the aim to harness the huge resources of Africa for its development and the development of their people, like we've seen in Asia and other parts of the world. And it's most unfortunate. I mean, you talk about a 3.1 trillion GDP for a continent when a state in the United States can boast of that. California, for example, has got a GDP of about $3.9 trillion. Texas, 2-point-something trillion dollars. And the entire continent of over 50 countries cannot boast of it can only boast of 3.1 trillion. And that's really disheartening. There are many things that are mitigating the growth against the growth of Africa, but mainly because we have very poor leadership. In every country in Africa, we are plagued with corruption, ineptitude, and so on and so forth. I mean, even South Africa that you can boast of, the economy is run by non-blacks mainly. I mean, you have the Dutch background and the Asians who are really running the economy. When you go to check what's going on in what the Black African majority are using for the development of our country, is little or nothing. So it's very disheartening that Africa is where it is, because we have more than 60% of the resources of the world, and yet we cannot boast of good 2% of the world GDP. Now, you talk about Africa free trade agreements that they sign. It's just not there. It's not active. The impact is not there because there is no cross trade among African countries. So African countries can import stuff that they have in Africa from Europe, from America, from any other part of the world, but not from themselves. That's where they even exist. Standardization and a whole lot of other things are not just there. So Nigeria in particular has got a major role to play in terms of leading in the industrialization and also vamping up its economy. It's not enough to tell other African countries do this, but are you also showing example? What is happening now in Nigeria? What is the state of our economy? The economy is almost comatose. So you give advice to, it's like tell physician cure thyself.
Oh, you just hit it on it. There's this word that for the man who's a spectator watching people building a story building, it's always very easy. Dig it this way, add the bricks here. But until they want, you had to say, okay, come put mortar to it, you know what it feels like. But let me come over to Chibuzo. Chibuzo, are you any surprised that, like Joseph had mentioned now that, look at it, they can't even trade among themselves, not even go there. Do Africans really, are we even opened up for visits first? I must visit to able to see opportunities in countries. Let's even look at that aspect.
So you hit a very soft spot, because I think there's a major problem with the way we think about each other in Africa, right? It's sad that when we go to the West and we go to other parts of the world, they look at Africans and look at Africans from one single skin tone and say, Africans, you're all Africans, so Africa, single. They do not understand they do not want to even realize the continent is it's not homogeneous at all, so heterogeneous, and there's so many different parts of this beautiful continent. But we do the same thing to each other here. If you go to the guys in South Africa, like like Mr. Joseph said, basically you go to guys in the South Africa and you see some of the black guys, some of the comments will go back to your countries, go and fight for your countries. And I do understand the fact that why, it's born from a mentality of wanting to protect what I think I have, as against allowing others to share from it. And you see that across the other parts of Africa. Once things go sour, you look for someone who you want to blame. The imaginary invader, the guy who has come and take what you have. Meanwhile, this guy has just come because he has to make ends meet. And you have this all across board, which is the reason why we have our various visa systems across Africa. Unfortunately, most of the Nigerians do complain about places like, our friends down in the south, the guys in Kenya. But even Nigeria's visa processes are as horrible for anybody that that has tried to take it. It's horrible, and it's built to frustrate. Just imagine how how our passport process used to be for Nigerians. In the opposite, it's a process that just built to make money and give little value. But we have all these things. We have ACFA. Nobody wants to play because everybody is distrustful. If you look at what we're talking about, our trade balance or our trade imbalance at the end of last year, the major storyline, and I think it was Reuters that was pointing out when he was doing the analysis, that we had if you look at the trade between Nigeria and Benin Republic, as in the official trade, because I'm not talking about unofficial trade, it's so little. And the same thing resonates across the continent. We are going down to China, we are going down to Europe, we are trying to go with our beggar bowls, asking for more. But we are not talking to each other, trying to build our own collaborative muscles to help each other out of it. So it feels like we are comfortable being the so-called big people in small baskets. So, Nigeria wants to close the borders against Benin. Meanwhile, Benin is making all the money from that should have come to Nigeria through imports, because we don't even want to talk to each other. We are thinking only about self. And in thinking about self, we are bringing self down.
So in summary, help us close up this headline, Joseph, as in response to what the Vice President is talking about, Africa being able to ramp up the continent's 3.1 trillion US dollars GDP gap. Talk to us about, in all of this, from your submissions, it would seem like there is protectionism in the heart of this. Joseph, speak to this.
Yeah, I mean, until we wake up, we wake up and smell the coffee. The world is leaving us behind in every sector, technology, whatever, infrastructure. So African leaders have got to sit down and actually be honest about what they are doing and understand that until we are united, we can't achieve anything. And it starts with very little things, just like Chibuzo mentioned, very little things. Open up the borders, let people, Africans be able to move across from one place to the other, bring investment. Nigeria in Ghana is envied. They'll begin to make life difficult for you and all that. All those kind of things have got to change. And it is the leaders who are going to drive that process. It's nobody else. So it is in our hands. We have to change.
Chibuzo, let's drift on now to pick up the papers. That's the Punch newspaper. But before that, I see messages building on the horizon already. So just keep the messages coming. We'll get to it shortly. But the EPOs will be part of it. Just make sure it is 20809 4440981. WhatsApp messages only. Chibuza, the Punch newspaper is talking, and this is Food Matters now. Greek Ministry to supply 40% of the residents' food needs, and that's relating to Lagos State and the landmass of Lagos, its population, and the irony of being able to feed this population. Speak to it, Chibuza.
So this target is laudable in looking at trying to provide at least 40% of the residents' food needs within Lagos. It's laudable in theory. As in looking at it from the surface, it's quite laudable. I'm a cynical person, but especially when it comes to dealing with government. So I'm always very, I like to look beyond the surface. Do they have the data? How many residents are we talking about? What's the purchasing power of the residents? At what cost will this food be made available? And the comments were made by the special advisor to the governor on agriculture at the Lagos State Food Systems Stakeholders Breakfast meeting, which is, for me, politicians and political appointees take advantage of most of these meetings to give out their typical, political talk shops and anecdotes and comments. They've stated out what they want to do. They've talked a lot about how the rice farms in Imota, or the rice production in Imota is ramping up. How they are trying to provide the basic stuff which most Lagosians would require: tomato, yam, rice. Well, those are the basic things. Like I said, for me, it's always about having the data. How many people are you providing for? How many people can afford to pay for what? How quickly can this food get to their table? How are we doing with storage? I will always be one of those people that tell you that when it comes to agriculture, Nigeria's problem, and I'm going outside Lagos, because in reality, I don't think Lagos can provide all the needs that for consumption, or even 40% of the needs on its own. In the same way we talked about African countries, we need to do a lot more internally within Nigeria. Each state has its own area of expertise. We need to be a bit more strategic in this country, and I keep on saying it. I have stayed in places, or I've visited places in this country where food is basically laid on the roadsides to rot by the end of the day. So it's not about our production capabilities. It's about what do we do next? What are the channels? How do we move those foods out? How do we store them? I always give the example of a place I've been to, at least on several locations, Makurdi, Benue State. Go to the market. I used to go past the market every day. Every morning, basically, you have a refuse at the market because food was left to rot the night before. So they have to move those things out and bring fresh ones. I bought bags of yams in a sack for a pittance. Yeah. It was good for me, but I imagine how much would that pittance have been able, that effort was what the farmer did for a season. How many bills can that pay? What would stop that farmer from sending his children to enter a car in the middle of the night to come down to Lagos to ride Keke Marwa? Because he can't even afford to pay his school fees, talking about health hospital bills. How do we solve these problems internally within the state, within this country? How does a Lagos, and I know Lagos has tried to do that, I think with, was it Kebbi State previously? How does a Lagos partner with another state that is producing this to do this? How do the states in the food basket of the country influence the government to say, instead of building all these chains that we're putting around that are carrying people and we're going at a loss, why don't we solve this strategic problem of moving food? Why don't we get these old moribund trail routes that are sitting down across places like Benue, Nasarawa, that have been there since, I'm almost sure some of them are that since the earlier republics or when the British left them, and they've been unrepaired. Why don't we repair them and turn them to cargo points and move our food out, get onboarding the roads that we don't have, because most of those roads are falling out due to overuse and disrepair? Why don't we work these things and make this country has no business looking at our inflation rates at where they are almost 30% officially, and saying that food inflation is what is driving it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so Joseph, I'll come to you. Chibuza has raised quite an issue, and central to what he's saying, to Lagos achieving even its 40% mandate of feeding the population, lies with also doing comparative advantage. We've got the population to consume what you produce. How do we get it here? So talk to that in a short while before we reach out to the next paper.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, just as laid it, it's so very clear that people are centric. I mean, state centric. I mean, everybody just working in silos. You just and it doesn't help anybody, because the truth is that if states on their own can achieve quite a lot. I mean, take the states in the West, for example. If they are working as a group, Ogun virtually fits Lagos. Ogun State, virtually feeds Lagos. So why would Lagos not be thinking of some kind of synergy with Ogun State to achieve what it's planning? Because there is no how, just like you said, no how Lagos can feed 40% of the population. From where? What landmass? What are they growing? How much of it can it go into the market? So it's strategic planning by the various leaders across states that can achieve a growth for us in every sector. We can't continue to be working in silos, and I hope we can achieve anything.
And for you, you live in Abuja. Abuja would resonate the kind of Benue scenario that Chibuze had mentioned, where foods, they agree, all around Abuja, you have Niger, Kogi producing food.
Much of the food eaten in Abuja comes from the neighboring states. But how does the food get in here? That's the challenge. I mean, what we are talking about, people have to struggle on their own. If you have ever traveled between Abuja and Jos, most of the vegetables, fresh vegetables, cabbage and all that, they all come from Jos. But the journey from Jos to Abuja is stressful. So until we find solutions like transportation, ease of transportation, I don't need to accompany my goods to Abuja. I shouldn't. I can go to cargo it in the rail terminal from Jos, and it lands in Abuja, and the supplier, the person supplying, takes delivery and get paid. These are things that were possible before, but we never expanded, we never grew. So that's the problem.
Anyway, if only carrots will be able to tell the story of how it made its way to grace the salad and also grace the fried rice, the story how it made it, we would also respect it in a way. While
you may not even eat it. You may bleed to be cried.
So, Joseph, take us to the Daily Trust newspaper, where the gunshots, as was reported, as police rescue victim abducted in Abuja, and the kidnapper arrest, and also build around that. The news we hear around Abuja abductions. Speak to that for us.
It is frightening what is happening, and for a long time it's been building up. But like as always, we've been playing ostrich with security in Nigeria. Most of the council areas in Abuja border other states where a lot of anti-terrorism activities have been going on. So we've have accounts months ago of the movement of these criminals into the forests of Niger State, for example, where they are infiltrating to the forests of, and then we've had them moving from Kaduna. We've had them all these places. So Abuja was actually being encircled by criminal groups. And when the U.S. Embassy used intelligence to say this was what are happening, they were shunned by the last administration to say, why are you saying, why did you give such advisory and so on? But they had credible intelligence of the infiltration of Abuja by terrorist cells. So it is not surprising that we're seeing this pop up here and there. Now, what do terrorists do? They do the kidnapping to raise funds. So they kidnap for ransom, they get the money, then they reinvest it in their terrorist organization, or they outrightly steal. So many cattle rustling and all those things are the sources of funding for their terrorist activity. So all they are saying is simply mopping up funds from every sources to be able to. In Abuja, I mean, Buhari is just on the edge of Abuja. I mean, it's just like 20 minutes drive from the city center. And the family her entire family was taken away. And people had to begin to raise money to be able to free up these victims. And in other far remote areas, it's been going on, and the reports have been made. And the communities are helpless in those places where bandits just go. They call them bandits, but terrorists actually go and tax the people, collect money from them, raid them, and so on and go. Now, we have people waking up because it's too close for comfort that people are talking now. Oh, the minister is saying, oh, everything be done to exterminate them because it's getting close home. It's getting close home. It shouldn't have to be so. We have to be able to be proactive in managing security, but it's not happening. So until it gets close to us, then we act. Every government official, every elected official is protected by a battalion of soldiers and policemen and so on. So they are insulated from the fear that comes. It's only getting closer now. Oh, they've been able to deploy drones and everything and all that, all because it's getting too close for comfort.
Thank you very much.
We have to be more proactive than we have been.
Chibuzo, let's drift on to the Premium Times, where brain drain is a major theme of this report from the Premium Times, and it speaks here of Nigerian government grants the ministry authority to approve. So go ahead with recruitment for hospitals.
Okay, so our new reality, I don't want to use the word normal because there's nothing normal for the country of Nigeria's ability or capability in theory being in a way the mess that we're in today. So and it's all, for me, it's all about numbers. It's all about understanding what you need strategically for every sector. If you do need, if a country that's serious about development should understand how much input do I require in terms of human resource, how much do I need in terms of money or financing to run specific projects or hit particular targets. At times in Nigeria, I'm worried that at times we stumble across these things and just hit in the dark. So in previous regimes, we heard about ministers talking about how many doctors, how we had excess of doctors across the country, that we could actually move them into other sectors, how, you know, they were so multi-talented and multi-skilled that the dress he was wearing was sewn by a doctor who had, you know, basically left practice. And it also spoke then to about how most of our leaders live in a bubble, because while we had a lot of doctors jostling for things, where were these doctors? They were in the city centers. So even right now, we're talking about a lot of the brain drain. We're not even talking about the guys in the villages somewhere who do not have access to a doctor nearby. We're not talking about I don't even want to look at the United Nations ratio, the UNA, the ratio about how many doctors need to teach about a particular patient or people or population. Because most of our doctors, even the problems you're speaking about today, are sitting in the urban centers, because what's the motivation for most doctors to sit in the rural areas in terms of funds? So what has happened now? The government has taken a step, to at least which is good in the short term to solve the problem, the shortage short term, which is obviously in hiring anybody or replacing anybody in the ministries, there is a system that needs to be followed, and this is a big bureaucracy. What the government has done is basically remove some of the processes that are part of this bureaucracy to speeding up the replacement of health personnel, which I think is quite good, and I think if put into place will at least help stop the short-term problems. You know, the long-term problem is how do we retain our medical doctors, because even the guys you are recruiting to fill up these gaps, how long can you keep them in a system that might not offer so much for them in public practice unless they found a way to be able to bridge public and private practice together? How do we create the good environment for them to thrive and work and be the best that they can? Because for some of them, it's not just about this funds, it's about how many hours do I have to do and watch people pass every day, what things I can prevent. How do I keep myself in this state of mental torture when I have opportunities and possibilities to go somewhere, live a better life in quotes, and earn better, and also do my best? So the government needs to think about that also long term. I think the other part of this story was talking about the president's the actions the president has taken in terms of pharmaceuticals and trying to create an environment for pharmaceutical companies to thrive in our new reality, of our new current reality of where a lot of companies have exited the country and prices of drugs have risen. I do not envy anybody who has a serious medical condition. When I go into pharmacy today, when they bring out all these fancy drugs, I ask for the generic. That's basically me. And I have an
By generic, you mean the local version?
Generic, the local Indian versions, because I'm not going to pay for any of those brands. As a kid, I used to have asthma. I thank God I outgrew it. Because right now, last time I walked into, I only used to have an inhaler for years, just in my bag, because we have it. Last time I wanted to go and get another one just to keep in my bag because it would keep in my bag. When they told me the price, I said, "Don't worry, there's no that I'm not going to be safety conscious this time with 65,000 naira. That's not a safety conscious ideal, but that's the reality a lot of people have to face, and people would not earn up to 65,000 naira a month."
So let's go over to messages piling up already for our attention this morning. I've got JP saying, the integration of Africa can only happen when she collaborates as against competing. Even internally as a nation, we segregate across tribes, let alone countries on the continent. That's, reoccurring what we mentioned earlier on. Let's go to Anthony Francis. Tony from Marine Beach says, now we cannot talk about independence without financial independence. Because money is power. Humans are wired in a way that there is always the craving for power, and I didn't expect the whites to go just give independence to blacks. They will find other means, including using our own ignorant brothers who pose as leaders, as colonists, to actualize their goal of getting us back in the cage. Africans should wake up. That's Tony's message. And Jane Ishe comes with a message speaking about during her service here. Oh, well, okay, I won't get where she started from. Okay, the power of vested or self-interest in is Africa's problem. A leader doesn't see the followers as part of responsibility. And it talks about a place, Burutin in Kwara State, food rots like crazy. Transportation to Ilorin from Barutin was 9 hours instead of 2 hours or 1 hour with good roads. Just very sad. And that was way back in 2003. See what we're talking about. Dan Okuda's message pops in here and it goes on. Insecurity is at the root of food crisis or inflation crisis. The government should tackle this security crisis frontally. Dan's suggestion. And coming in, Joseph Menye's message goes up here. The greatest sickness is hypocrisy and lackadaisical policies. How can you close borders with the claim of insecurities? The northern borders open while Southwest closed. Is the customs agency not there being honest, telling the government that some policies is affecting the economy and others? That's what Joseph leaves us with. Idimokuza's message comes, does it mean the president doesn't know that removing subsidy without putting first four refineries in operation would bring hardship to Nigerians? Didn't he know that Nigerians are already suffering under the former president? And it goes on and on. Fabian comes up with a message here for us. Fabian from Ekwe. If the government is serious about the business, the brain drain in the health sector, they will sit down and strategize on a sustainable way forward. A number of those who they will rush to recruit will leave within a year. Chibuzo's thought once again, can you keep them? You recruit them. It's like fetching water with a basket from the river. Before you move, it's out already. Final message, Gilbert Musa's message here from Festac. Said, referring to Joseph, he says, Mr. Joseph said it all on agriculture and continuous food wastage in Nigeria. Hashtag Operation Feed the Nation scheme of May 1976 on his mind. I would add security to the list. We need to secure our farmlands in Nigeria. Thoughts of Gilbert Musa. This is how we have to wrap it up this morning, but I want to say a big thank you to you, gentlemen, Joseph Obari, for your time and your thoughts this morning on the show.
It's been fun. It's nice having us here, and have a great weekend. Safe. Everybody stay safe. Thank you.
And I want to say thank you to Chibuzo. Where's your
Thank you so much, Amas. Thank you so much, Lagos. It's been a pleasure, Joseph. We'll be here with you. Thank you so much for the time.
And that's the sides of Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1 FM. Up next is the Locker Room with Tega. Stay tuned. The Eagles. Well.